Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the GM, and today we're talking about Barbie, Buckaroo Banzai, Leonardo da Vinci, and just all sorts of stuff. But before we get into it, smash like, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. We've got an awesome community here, and it's all thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. So, back in the 1990s, my friend Carl wanted to play an angel in our role playing game. And at the time, I saw a lot of problems with that idea. And instead, he ended up playing a race from an old book called Deities and Demigods called an Air Maiden. And to make a long story short, that character, for whatever reason, got very, very popular in our game. And a bunch of other people wanted to play her kids. And not long after that, we ran a game where my wife played the son of that character, a character named Devlin. And when she rolled up Devlin, or Dev, as we called him, she used the tables from Cyberpunk 2020 to select a random occupation. And what she rolled up was their version of a bard, which was this cyberpunk rock star. And if it had stopped there, I probably would have been fine with it, but it didn't. Then my wife gave him medical skills and wanted him to also sort of fill the role of party healer. So now Dev was a rock star and a brain surgeon, and I hated that. My wife and I would fight about it for a long, long while until one day, totally at random, I showed her a movie I liked called Buckaroo Banzai, starring Peter Weller of RoboCop fame. I loved this movie as a kid, and at that point, hadn't seen it in ages. But we bought the DVD and watched it, and sure enough, Buckaroo Banzai was a rock star and a brain surgeon and a gadgeteer who invented their version of the DeLorean, basically. But instead of traveling through time, it traveled through dimensions. But getting back on topic, from my wife's point of view, I loved Buckaroo and hated Dev, and she thought that was unfair. In my defense, I told her I basically loved the whole dimensional DeLorean thing, and I had pretty much ignored the rock surgeon parts of the film. Anyways, so then we watched the special features, and in the director's commentary, they said the inspiration for Buckaroo Banzai was none other than Leonardo da Vinci. And that was the moment it all clicked for me. I'd never heard of a polymath at that point in my life, and I'd never associated Buckaroo with Da Vinci before. But once I did, Buckaroo Banzai made way more sense to me. And then so did Dev, to a point. I let Dev be a polymath, and my wife played him a lot after that. But a pet peeve of mine as a GM over the years was when someone who rolled up a character would just do things totally random. I always had people making a guy with like lightning bolts and speak with fish, and it drove me nuts. I'd try to get them to give their characters some sort of a theme, like call him the electric eel or something like that to tie it all together. And usually they didn't want that. And as such, their original characters seemed like a jumbled mess to me, and often they just weren't very likable or very memorable. Point being, I wished that we could connect the whole polymath theme to the Air Maiden thing somehow. So even after all of that, Dev still struck me as awkward. Anyway, so some time went by, and the year 2007 marked the 25th anniversary of the G.I. Joe, a real American hero toy line. To commemorate the event, Hasbro released a G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero 25th anniversary collection of newly sculpted 3 3/4 figures based on the line's best known and most popular characters. And as a result, my wife and I were in our local Toys R Us all the time buying those figures and trying to make sure that we had one of each. And while we were in Toys R Us, my wife wanted to check out the Barbie dolls because as a kid, Barbie and Rainbow Bright were her two favorite toy lines. Anyways, so we're looking at Barbies, and of course, they have Dr. Barbie, who's a brain surgeon, and Scientist Barbie that comes with a test tube or something. And of course, there was a series of Barbies designed to compete with Gem and the Holograms called Barbie and the Rockers. And as a brief aside, nobody ever seems to remember this, but one time when I was a kid, I saw a Barbie and the Rockers cartoon on TV one day. In terms of the look, it was a lot like the Gem and the Holograms cartoon. And the moment that I caught as I was flipping channels was them doing astronaut stuff of some sort. And then they landed on Earth and immediately were like, hey, girls, we're late for our rock concert. And so, as you might expect, I had no idea what was going on. And I want to say they swung by a 1950s diner too, like on the way to the concert. It was madness. Anyways, so my wife and I are in Toys R Us, and I'm kind of doing the Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing where I'm riffing on all of Barbie's many occupations, and I'm sure you can see where this is going. My wife gets the idea to play Barbie, but it's not like she's only Dr. Barbie or something like that. She wants to be all the Barbies at once. And now that I knew what a polymath was, I felt like that worked better than Dev did because then there was nothing else involved, like wings or regeneration or something that had nothing to do with that central theme. So I gave it the green light. So in our game world, Barbie's real name was Barbara Millicent Roberts. She was the genius daughter of George and Margaret Roberts, and they were from the fictional town of Willows, Wisconsin. And she had younger siblings like the twins, Stacy and Todd, as well as younger sisters like Skipper, Kelly, and Chrissy. And she also had a cousin named Francie. And throughout the 1950s in our game world, Barbie attended Willows High School, where she had an on again, off again romantic relationship with her then boyfriend, Ken, aka Kenneth Sean Carson. And right out of the gate, we established that she was a genius. We looked up stats for characters like Batman and Reed Richards, and whoever had the highest intelligence on their character sheet, that's the intelligence that we put on Barbie's character sheet. Likewise, since there is a gold medal winning Olympic gymnast Barbie, I reasoned that Barbie was not only going to the Olympics, but she was competing with the most agile characters on the planet and was still winning the gold, beating them out. So we gave her peak human dexterity as well. I've never seen a roided out bodybuilder Barbie, so we didn't give her peak strength. Instead, we decided that she would have martial artist, which in DC Heroes you can substitute for your strength. And then we decided we needed someone to teach her martial arts, so we decided it should be Wonder Woman. And that was for a couple of reasons. First, on more than one occasion, Mattel has made a superhero version of Barbie called Princess Power, which amuses me since Mattel also made She-Ra Princess of Power, but I digress. Anyways, the superhero Barbies have had different outfits over the years, which now that I think about it is pretty on brand for Barbie. But anyways, some of them look an awful lot like a pink version of Wonder Woman's costume. So connecting the dots seemed logical to me. For that matter, at one point, they flat out made Wonder Woman Barbie, who is 100% wearing the Wonder Woman costume. And in our game world, the powers come from the costume. So we heavily implied that for some reason, Barbie had actually filled in for the real Wonder Woman at some point. But the other reason I wanted her first adventure to involve Paradise Island is the island was surrounded by a magical fog, and anyone who passed through it would never grow old. Thus, in the pre crisis era, why the Amazons had unaging. So we did that to all the Barbie characters. We put them on a yacht and we shipwrecked them on Paradise Island, where the Amazons hated Ken, by the way. And they taught the girls martial arts. And of course, helped them return to the United States along with Ken, who had been, the prisoner of the Amazons. And by the way, who Barbie broke up with not too awful long after that. And then we get to where there were adventures I ripped off from Doc Savage, Man of Bronze, which I love. For those who don't know, Doc Savage was also a polymath who went around the world having adventures. And he would take his friends with him, and each one could contribute in some way. So we did the exact same thing. And then in 2008, the Iron Man movie came out, and among other things, we loved Tony Stark's house in Malibu. So we ripped that off and gave our version of Barbie a very similar dream house in Malibu. We said it was a mansion and that the floors that were above ground level were pretty much exactly what you would expect from a Barbie mansion. Then we added levels below ground that we ripped off from the X-Men mansion from the X-Men movies. And the various things underground then included science labs, operating rooms, a gymnasium for training, etc. And honestly, those games were way more fun than I thought they would be. In third edition DC Heroes, there are 14 skills, so I ran at least one adventure for each one of those skills. So, for instance, for her acrobatics skill, Barbie had to infiltrate the lair of a James Bond style villain that was on top of a mountaintop. And this guy was abducting and brainwashing attractive Olympic gymnasts. And I was kind of inspired by the old James Bond movies, but we also borrowed a lot from stuff like the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman. That was kind of the vibe of that one. And by the way, these adventures kind of all took place in a random year in our timeline. And then for animal handling, we ripped off the Crocodile Hunter. And we also established that Barbie has a private zoo full of all the animal companions Mattel gave her over the years. And of course, me being a vehicles guy, I snuck in a 4x4 pink Jeep, which we filled with James Bond style gadgets. For the artist skill, I ripped off National Treasure as well as the Da Vinci Code. And that all started with Barbie's paintings on display in an art museum. And then they find a clue and kind of go on a scavenger hunt. For the charisma skill, I ripped off Silence of the Lambs, of all things. And I had Barbie interrogating a villain in the custody of the authorities. And she'd get him to give her clues when nobody else could. So she was kind of our Clarice in that one. For the detective skill, I ripped off the Sherlock Holmes stuff, the newer stuff on the BBC. For the gadgetry skill, we did a crossover with Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, and they had a mission where they had to go into the negative zone. For the martial artist skill, I ripped off an old Bruce Lee movie, and I had Barbie in Hong Kong fighting organized crime figures there. For the medicine skill, I ripped off an episode of House. For military science, we did a team up with Black Widow. For occultist, it was Doctor Strange. For the thief skill, it was Catwoman. For the vehicles skill, I ripped off Fast and the Furious. And we gave her the Barbie Corvette, which I specifically said was a 1979 Corvette Stingray that was full of customized features. And that was my favorite adventure. And then for the weaponry skill, we did a crossover with Green Arrow, in which Barbie was pretty much Pink Arrow. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was way more fun than I thought it would be. Sometimes I run games for my wife or daughter, and they like them, but I don't, which is fine. I know that sometimes we do what I want to do, and they don't care about it. That's just the nature of things. But despite the fact that it was a game about Barbie, of all things, it was actually really, really well received by my circle of gamers. Which reminds me, something I've noticed over the years is I can love a given thing, like Transformers say, but when I try to run a game about it, it will fall flat for a variety of reasons. And then conversely, sometimes a genre or a franchise that I don't care about at all makes for the best RPG. And that was actually the case here. And now that we're at the end of this episode, I would be curious if you have ever played an RPG that sounded bad on paper, but surprised you when you actually played it. So, if so, I would love to hear about that in the comments section. And while you're at it, of course, smash that like button and check to see if you're still subscribed. Because, like I always say, YouTube loves to unsubscribe you and not tell you. So, take a look and make sure you're still subscribed. And from all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, happy holidays. And we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.